If you like what we do here on Skiba News Nation, please like and subscribe, and also share with others so that we can grow the biggest truth-seeking community on the internet. Huge shout out to all of our Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this show without you, so I just wanted to say thank you. And if you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation.
What it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you can respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
Hey Skiba News Nation family, we have a very special interview, very special guest, our friend Zach Bauer from An American Homestead. So please welcome Zach Bauer to Skiba News Nation. And thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say my mom and my dad have so much love and respect for you. And I always like to ask people that knew my dad, can you tell me how you first met him or when you first learned of him?
Goodness gracious, I don't know if I can remember that. I probably online, and going back and forth and just, sharing things that we had learned. Maybe it was even back on Facebook. And then I think the first time I actually met him was in San Diego. We were doing, I did like 3 conferences there. And I think the second one he was invited to, and I got to meet him there. And, we've had a good friendship. It was good. And, even I remember there was times, I've got a lot of great memories of your dad. Some of those being one of them, but it was really, your mom and dad was the cohesiveness that they had at conferences. Like they were one. And I remember there was times where he would be trying to talk to people at his table. And I remember looking over at him one time and just watching her watch him, and she would anticipate the things that he was talking about and the subject matter. And as he was talking about these things, she would be handing him materials because she knew what he was talking about in order to give that person the information that he was talking to, what they wanted. And I just thought that was amazing. You could see them work together and see the cohesiveness of their relationship, and I thought that was great.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Absolutely.
So what's it like completely living off grid? Because I have no idea what that's like. But
it was a challenge at first, and I think the first few years you're living off grid, depending on how you start and what your goals are, it can be kind of like living in survival mode. And that's the way it was for us for at least the first 3 years. And as you look back after that first 3 years, you're like, wow, look at all the things we've done. Look at how the infrastructure we've built. And you slowly start into maintenance mode. And that's the goal, is you're in survival mode for a while, and then you move into maintenance mode and continuing to maintain the things you've built while continuing other projects that you still have, ongoing. But it can be very hard, but it's very rewarding, is what I tell people. And so I love living off grid. In fact, there's times where I still have to just I can't believe I get to do this.
No, it sounds pretty peaceful being without my phone. Like that just sounds awesome.
Well, I do have internet. I have internet, and I have Wi-Fi. I even have a fiber optic. I mean, I live in the middle of nowhere. People come out here and they're like, I can't believe how far out you live. There's some very remote places of the Ozarks, and we have, I made myself a very squeaky wheel to get a fiber line that was in our area attached to our homestead. And so now I have fiber optics, I have internet. But yes, when you do some research on like RF frequencies and some of the spurious emissions that take place in the city, it's very different out here. And I've gotten to the point where I'm so used to it now that when I do go to conferences and I speak in cities and I stay in hotels, it almost, after a couple of days, I can feel it in my body. I can feel, it's almost like a slight ache in my body. My kids are even more susceptible to it because it's all they've known is living off grid, really. Mm-hmm. And so, but yeah, it's very rewarding. I like being out here, and I see more deer than I see people on most days.
Wow, that's great.
Hey Zach, thanks for coming on to Skiba News Nation. Of course, for those who are unfamiliar, Zach has been doing the YouTube stuff for a very long time, and one of the things that you and Rob would always jive about over the years was current events in terms of like eschatology and looking into the scriptures and what's coming. It seemed to be one of the fun topics at conferences, and also things like extra biblical books and looking into the past, like the Book of Enoch and stuff, sheds a light on prophecy in today's world. It sheds a light on a lot of things going on, and of course you have the famous saying of what's your horse in the race, right, Zach? So whenever we talk about what's happening in the world and prophecy and things like that, that's one of those areas that you and Rob were always talking about at conferences. And so I was just curious your thoughts on current events. I mean, we're living in a crazy time. Just a few weeks ago we had an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate. We have all these different things happening, turmoil in the Middle East. We have just list after list of things happening. I just, you don't get this many opportunities to pick your brain. And so I was just wondering, what's on your radar? What's your horse in the race right now, Zach? Because the world's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's only getting crazier. My horse in the race at this point is that we have to be living in the last days, and and there's lots of evidences for that, and I've talked about that in the past. But I think one of the main reasons why we are absolutely living in these days, those last days, is just the amount of sin in the world. And when I say that, anyone can come back and be like, "Well, Zach, there's always been sin in the world," and that's correct. There has always been sin in the world, but for the most part, throughout most of human history and most of human cultures, that sin, outward sin, has been, hidden. There's always been an uprightness to a lot of cultures, a right and a wrong that exists. And today that's been completely flipped on its head. So not only is sin open, it's celebrated.
Yep. And
that is a distinct contrast from all of human history that we have recorded. We have a time where not only is sin open, outward and outwardly celebrated, if you have any sense of righteousness or a sense of right and wrong or a sense of morality, you're now openly persecuted for that morality. That is different. Never has that existed throughout all of human history. So people, and this is one of the reasons people don't take into context what has been. And so what we have this idea of is that, oh, well, what Peter talks about, well, we're always going to be, things have always continued as they were. And that's what these people who scoff at the Bible will say. And that's what we're seeing today. Oh, this is normal. This has always been the way. Now we're just progressing as a culture. We're coming into our own, we're evolving, to allow all of these things that would have been outward and openly horrible and sinful to be accepted in our culture today. So I absolutely believe we're in the last days. And I don't know the time frame of that. Ideas, I don't know. But, my horse in the race is that, yes, this is the last days and that we should be making sure we're squared away and staying focused on God's truth, God's word, and lately I've been kind of going back to the book of Ecclesiastes, where so much wisdom is given in that book. But at the very end, he says, okay, let's just round it out. Bottom line in the book of Ecclesiastes, like the second to last verse or whatever it is, the duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. That's your whole job as a man. That's your whole job as a human being, is to fear God and keep his commandments. And we have an entire world right now where that's not happening.
What are your thoughts about the Olympics? I mean, these crazy things that are going on.
It's so like, I know people in my life who are just kind of like, I would call lukewarm Christians, lukewarm believers. They're just kind of going, yeah, they read the Bible, they go to church, and they, but I show them pictures of the Olympics, of what took place, and these are people who are half paying attention, if paying attention at all sometimes, and they had no idea that this supposed Last Supper mockery took place. They had no idea that they really paraded a golden calf out at the Olympics. It's like, but unless someone speaks to them and says, look at this, they just don't see it. And when I have done that, I'm like, did you see what they did, for the Last Supper mockery? And did you see the golden calves they brought out? Wow, yeah, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Well, I won't be watching those Olympics this year. And the Olympics as a whole, its very root is satanic, because it's a celebration of what man can do. Yep. It's a celebration of man's achievements. And that's not anything biblical about that. It always needs to go back to, what has God done? What can God do? Where is our hope and promise? That is what should be celebrated in the world today. And of course it's not. The exact opposite is being celebrated and openly portrayed out there. So, my horse in the race right now is, we're living in the last days, and I don't have a time frame, but I'm paying attention. I'm a watchman on the wall, and I think we need to be getting ready and make sure we are counted as the virgins who have the oil in their lamps.
Yeah, there's so much about those big events and these ceremonies that are conducted on the world stage that's just passed off as artistry, they're just trying to send a message, they don't even know what they're saying. But at the same time, when people look at these events, there's only a few things that brings the whole world together. One of those is the Olympics, right? All these countries are supposedly being represented. And then the other thing that brings the whole world together is war, right? I mean, I think there's just a handful of things that really unifies the whole world. And so whenever you see things like that depicted on the world stage in an event that the whole world's supposed to be watching, that's why we have people over the past 15, 20 years looking at world event stage events. Like the 2012 Olympic Games had a big ceremony with doctors and needles and beds and nurses and all that kind of stuff. And then we saw a few years later the COVID scenario happened. So there does seem to be a predictive programming aspect of these events that truthers like us watch, and we're like, oh, okay, here's what they're trying to shill on us next, right?
And again, going back to the whole duty of man, fear God and keep his commandments. Well, what happens when you don't keep commandments? You encounter the curses of those not keeping those commandments or violating those commandments. And that's what we're seeing today. So, here's what I see on the agenda. The agenda right now is crime, war, a falling of morality, an economic collapse. These are things that are coming because these are all curses of what we have basically created as a result of disobedience. And so that's what we have to look forward to. War is absolutely coming, and instead of getting all wrapped up into what side is right, I think we have to keep in mind, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities. These people who, no matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, or who you think is right about the Israel Gaza stuff, or if Taiwan kicks off, or Iran, or all this stuff. Forget about who's right. Understand what this is all being brought upon by, and it's a fighting of the principalities that are in control of this earth right now. And I encounter a number of people who will come to me and say, Zach, why would a holy God, allow all of this hurt and all of this? Why would a God allow economic collapse, which leads to starvation? Why would a God allow war that leads to death? Why would a God allow all of this crime to continue and people to go unpunished? You saw that thing in probably UK where they were putting people in jail for sometimes over a year for making posts about an event, and then meanwhile an immigrant rapes young children, and he's giving community service. Why would a God allow that? And when someone asks me that question, my response is, well, first off, I recognize your immaturity of the word, because you're not reading your Bible. Not only does God allow these things, but he sits in the heavens and laughs. Psalms chapter 2. Because they're breaking their bands, they're cutting their cords. What does that mean? Because we have, let's just say, for example, we have this idea of what it means for marriage between a man and a woman. And so the world is cutting that band. They're cutting that cord because they want a new definition of those things, a new definition of morality. And all of the hurt that goes with that cutting of that band and cord. And again, I'm referring to Psalms chapter 2. And he laughs. He laughs while all of this hurt is happening, while all of this stuff is going on, because he knows the game is not over. He knows the game's not over. All of this stuff can be taking place. All of this hurt, all of this tragedy, all of this murder and whatever. But he laughs because he knows the game's not over, because we have a hope and promise. He's going to make all things right. And he's laughing at the enemies, the principalities that we're fighting against, their attempt at trying to win the game. And he's like, guys, you're not even close. And he laughs.
You've talked a lot about blessings and curses. How does this have a way of leading people through a lot of these turbulent times when it comes to observance of Torah? How does that lead people to become preppers, and how is that kind of giving people clarity in a very confusing time to live?
I think it was Mark chapter 13 where our Messiah says, to you I say unto all, watch. Because he's describing all of these horrible things that are going to happen. And if we're really paying attention to our Bible, we're going to watch. Well, it's impossible to watch and not speculate about what we are watching. And if we are halfway switched on, that allows someone who's watching and speculating about what we're watching to go ahead and prepare. And so the prudent man, it says in Proverbs, I believe it's 22, says that we are basically going to hide ourselves when danger approaches. The same way when you see a tornado coming at you, you're not going to stay outside and watch the tornado come at you. You're going to take shelter. You're going to do the prudent thing and hide yourself. And that leads into the prepping verse, where you have all of these people now who are like, you know what, maybe we ought to have some food stocked up. Because I put a video up on my American Homestead today of Deborah Burks talking about how we need to mandatory test every cow. We need to mandatory test every dairy worker. Well, this is not about protecting people from some virus that has a 99.8% survival rate. This is about control of a food supply. So when you're switched on and you're watching and you're speculating about what you're watching, you're going to be like, maybe we ought to have some food set aside, because they definitely want to take control of the food system, just like has been done over and over and over again throughout all of human history. We have Stalin, we have Mao Zedong, we have all these people who took control of a food supply in order to kill off a whole bunch of people. And, that's just a few mentioned. There's so many more. And so if that's the case, well, you're going to take inventory of all that, and you're going to be like, I need to do something and prepare and make sure I have something for my family, because no one wants to look at their family who's hungry, hasn't eaten for 3 days, and has no way to provide for them.
Yeah. What are the easiest foods to grow?
Oh, man, it's going to depend on where you're at and what your environment is. Every place is different. So it's a matter of, I tell people, like, for instance, I came here to the Ozarks and I immediately got a garden going, and I tried planting corn. Oh, well, that was really a tough row to hoe, because corn does not grow in the Ozarks. And so one old guy took me aside, and I told him, I was telling him about all my struggles with trying to grow corn. I was getting all these worms, and it just wasn't, growing the way I wanted it to. It wasn't coming up with full ears. And he said, Zach, this is not Iowa. If you want to grow corn, move to Iowa. You're in the Ozarks. Grow what grows here. And so he gave me some options about what grows here. And, there's lots of things that grow here. I tried to grow apple trees. You can't grow apple trees in the South very well. You can if you have lots of chemicals and fungicides and stuff like that. But Apples don't grow here very well. Peaches and pears grow wonderfully here, usually. So it's just you have to find out what's in your area, what grows well. And I always try to go out and find the old timers in your area, see what they're growing, see what they've been growing for, the last few decades, and then do what they do.
Awesome.
So, there's a lot of things that have happened in the world that are really shaking people awake from a lot of diversity of background. Back 10 years ago, the line in the sand between deceptive media and truther media was much more plain. I mean, back 10, 15 years ago, the whole mainstream media, people knew that, hey, there's something deceptive being pushed through this agenda. Even today, mainstream media, it can't really be trusted, right? But because we have so many people being shaken awake, there's this niche that's being filled by mainstream actors and big name personalities that's seeking to cater to alternative media, alternative news, trutherism, right? So you have people that are coming over from a mainstream background and then taking on kind of alt media. So you have guys like Tucker Carlson, you have guys like Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, all these types that are kind of turning their back on the mainstream machine, right? But at the same time, you have them pushing things like the Hallowed app, right? Go and, get your Catholic prayers in for the day. And so with all the different people that are presenting alt news, alt truth, how do we navigate kind of the worldviews that are being presented in those arenas? Because now it's much less black and white. Now it's less, oh, I'm just not going to pay attention to CNN. Now we have all these different talking heads giving us different perspectives and conspiracies and all that kind of stuff. I mean, how do we know who to trust and who to not trust, especially in relation to like Matthew 24, right? Many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. And it seems like a lot of people are finding faith in today's world. Yet what is the faith that they're presenting, and how does that contrast with, a true faith that isn't led astray by somebody that's saying, yeah, Jesus is the Christ, but you should, believe this or that,
Well, yeah, keep in mind, bottom line on that is let the Bible, let the Word be your guide, okay? The way you measure a stick to see if it's a straight stick is to have another straight stick put up against it and compare the two. And so if you're always comparing what all these people are saying to what the Word says, when you see a contradiction, when you see something that goes, sideways, you can tell the difference. But that comes with knowing your Bible. Understand, I think, why Tucker and others like him have gotten so popular is Tucker and others like him have gotten so big that they had a following where they realized, I don't need the system anymore. I don't need, the mainstream anymore. I can go out on my own, because he has been speaking a lot of truth, and many like him have been speaking a lot of truth. And so that gets a lot of people's attention. And then, like you said, I have been seeing this exact same thing that you just said. I see them start to promote prayers and, different adherence to different religious thoughts. And I'm like, eh. And when I see that, I think they also see, like I originally saw back years ago, that there has been a move away from what is true righteous morality. And this all got started back in 1960, I believe. This was when all this started to go downhill, slowly at first and then suddenly, as Ernest Hemingway would say. So what happened was we got the Bible out of schools, and now we have generation upon generation who have never heard it's wrong to murder. They've never heard it's wrong to steal. They've never heard it's wrong to commit adultery. They've never heard these things. And so that was the start of the slow decline. And these people like Tucker and others who are, Russell Brand, he's found Christianity, but his version of Christianity is bleh. So whatever. He understands there's a lack of morality. There's a lack of right and wrong, because right and wrong can be defined in any way you see fit when you don't have a Bible, a set of guidelines to go by. And so they're going into all these weird areas. And some of them at some point may find where they ought to be, where they should be. Many of them probably will not. because I don't think we've got the time. I think that the Father right now is setting aside a remnant that he's going to bring out. And I believe, I've said this before many times in my videos, a greater exodus. He's preparing his people for that eventuality. But right now you've got all these mainstream people out there recognizing a lack of morality, and they're trying to get back in some way to that sense of morality that began to be stripped away in the 1960s, Madeleine Murray O'Hair Supreme Court decision, where they got the Bible out of schools, because the Bible is the only place where you can really learn right and wrong. And going back to the Christian church or the Baptist church or some of these other church religious systems is only getting there, a little bit of the way.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, how the scriptures warn the last days many false prophets will arise. But then you have to ask the question, do you believe false prophets know they're false prophets, or do you think they just absolutely believe they're doing what's right? And is that how the deception is so powerful, is somebody is a false prophet without realizing they're filling that role?
Yeah, I think it could be both. Again, we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against principalities. What principalities are encouraging them and influencing them to go a certain way? For example, there's people out there who say, and I'm not saying it's completely wrong, but there are people out there who say, this is all part of the plan. They have this mastermind plan to take control and kill all humanity and all these things. And I'm like, I don't think that's necessarily true. Listen, people are smart and people are evil. We know the heart, right, is deceitful above all things, right? But they're not that smart and they're not that evil. They're just not. But what are the principalities, again, that we are fighting against? They've been playing this chess game for a long, long time, long before we were ever on the scene. So they have a pretty good idea of what they're doing. But the people today, a lot of these plans that some of these, like the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum and all these things that they want to implement, I doubt that their plans will be successful. They may be implemented and they may achieve some success, but ultimately they can't be successful, because when you break God's law, because a lot of what they're doing is breaking God's Torah, you're going to, come into the curses of your actions. And so they can't be successful. I mean, the entire creation of the Federal Reserve System, fractional reserve lending, that's against Torah, because the Torah says you will have an honest weight and an honest measure. And that's not what we have today. There's in no sense, shape, fashion do we have that today for our money system. And the money system we have today is absolutely against Torah. This is why we have the honest weights and honest measures. You will keep an honest weight and an honest measure in your bag. That means your wallet. And we don't have that in our wallets today. So that's why our economy is in tatters, and it's going to continue to be that way, because you cannot achieve success. You cannot achieve blessings with something that goes against God's commandments. And so all of these grand plans these people have, again, why does he sit in the heavens and laugh? He's like, he says, you imagine a vain thing. It's your vanity that makes you think you can print these dollars into oblivion and achieve, equal wealth for everyone, but that's not going to happen. It's never happened. And if we had just gone back to what the Father says is an honest weight and measure, you'll have lots more prosperity.
Do you think that blockchain technology is closer to that understanding of equal weights and measures? Or, I mean, how long can we go down the blockchain road before it literally becomes a block and chain us to the system, right?
I think the blockchain. Listen, Satoshi Nakamoto came out with this in 2009, which was right after the 2008 collapse, and everyone knew, if you were switched on, you were paying attention, that the banking system was going to fail, because they were basically printing money into oblivion, call it quantitative easing or whatever. And so again, coming up with a blockchain, Bitcoin at the time, was just another way to understand that we are severely lacking in our monetary system, but going down a different road than what actually the Bible calls for. And so that's kind of the result of Bitcoin. There's a lot of reasons why I like Bitcoin. It is finite, which is exactly what gold and silver is. Basically on this earth, is it's a finite resource. You only have so much, and you can only use it for so much. And so there's a lot of ways the way Bitcoin is set up that is the way gold and silver has always been, copper too, at a lesser extent, has always been used throughout all of human history. A lot of the other things that have come out since then, the altcoins and stuff like that, also it's a mixed bag because so many coins are different and have different results. But I've been in the Bitcoin game since 2011. I bought 3 Bitcoin and I sold them. I bought them for like less than $20 and I sold them for like 200. And then I got back in the game later in like 2016, 2017. But I'm recognizing this for what it is. And it's basically just a Band-Aid to fix a problem when all we need to do to fix the problem is just to go back to what the Bible calls an honest weight and measure.
Right on. So I know you don't celebrate pagan holidays, but what do you think about holidays like the 4th of July and Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so we see lots. People will say the same thing about birthdays, and here's my take on my personal opinion. I don't really put a big emphasis on birthdays. I don't put a big emphasis on 4th of July or Thanksgiving. We will get together with our family and celebrate Thanksgiving usually. But the reality is you go back to the Bible and you will see all kinds of different examples of people, righteous people, giving thanks for certain things that have happened to them. I look at the 4th of July and I see all it is a celebration of a military victory. That's the same thing that we have in the book of Maccabees. Okay, something that was done with birthdays. It's the same thing that Abraham did with Isaac when he celebrated the weaning of his child Isaac. He had a feast. It wasn't one of God's feast. It was, I believe, a difference between I think it was called a mikra in the Hebrew, and so that was different than a moedim. You have moedim and you have a mikra, and so a mikra was just a feast for the occasion. It's okay to have those. And today we have more like birthdays. We don't really celebrate the weaning of a child. We used to, even 200 years ago in this country, when a child was weaned, it was cause for a celebration. And they would have a small get-together or party. But, those are how I look at those holidays. There's plenty of examples in the Bible where they give thanks for certain things, military victories, weaning of a child, something amazing happens. And so they give thanks for that occurrence or that event. And then they go on. But they always keep the feast because those are the feasts that matter. Those are the feasts that that the Father says we have to keep. Those are the times where he says, I must meet with you on these times. And those are non-negotiable.
Keeping celebrations is also an integral part of building and preserving a culture. And I think in the Babylonian, modern system that we have, they give us all of these holidays to help give us the culture of Babylon in a way. It helps distract us because, if you just cut off and don't do any partying the whole year, you're a pretty boring family. So,
look at childbirth. Well, look at the childbirth. Like we used to celebrate when someone had a new baby. And now it's like in society as a whole, oh, wow, you brought another child into this world. And this is like your 3rd one or 4th one, or God forbid more. It's like, it's something that it's looked down upon. Whereas it used to be a celebration. Hey, we brought a new life into this world. We brought a new person. And that none of that is done today. It's all, and that's, again, it's something that, like you said, builds community, builds culture. And there's reasons why even Torah, Hebrew communities need to celebrate when things like that, when a marriage takes place. It's a reason to celebrate and to have a feast and to get excited about what that means.
Yeah, nowadays our culture's like, yeah, who wants to come over to my vasectomy party? Hey.
God says, God says, those who hate me love death. And when you're having a vasectomy, that's, you just celebrated death because you're no longer able to produce life.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to tell about how our culture is going the opposite direction as we should. Just like you said, what's good is evil and what's evil is good.
We're there.
We're definitely there. Oh man, Jeremiah, you have another question?
Well, yes, this was brought up to me, so I wanted to ask you. I've heard you used to work for, or you used to do work for political campaigns. What political campaigns have you done work for?
Back in the day, I did work for a number of congressmen, and the big one I did work for was who became Congressman Bill McCollum, the state of Florida. When I was in college there, he was trying to run for U.S. Senate, and I was on his team for that. Basically, the web side of that team and the marketing side, and then I was a campaign manager. Another big ones for a guy running for U.S. Congress in St. Louis. I helped him. He was a school teacher, fantastic guy, and he should have really been elected. He could have won if he would have, but the party, the Republican Party, was so against him because he was not initiated. This is one of the reasons why I think so many people hate Trump. And I'm not for Trump, I already have a king, right? So, but I think one of the reasons people hate him so much is because he's not part of that cloth that's been cut.
Yep.
And he's not a lawyer. Number one, they love lawyers. People who've been to law school, they love those guys. But this guy, he was a school teacher. He was a teacher, he was a professor. And he was very conservative, had a lot of great ideas, and very righteous man. And he was ostracized by the party, and they preferred in the primary a different lawyer who was not even from the state of Missouri. But he checked all the right boxes. His dad was a judge back in Massachusetts, and he had a lot of money. And so that's who the party goes after. So I did a lot of work for campaigns and did a lot of volunteer lobbyist activities in Jeff City in Missouri. And it got to a point where I saw so many ethics violations, because when one party commits ethics violations or any violations, the other party's quick to jump on them and point it out for everyone to see.
Yep.
But they're doing just as much garbage in the back scenes as the other party is. And so I saw so many ethics violations and things that should not have been done on the right side. I was like, guys, I can't do this anymore. And not only that, the big reason why I got out, and I was married at the time, so I told my wife about some of the things happening in Jeff City, which is the Missouri capital. And I was like, I don't know if I can be in this atmosphere as a man, because the reality is once you get into this atmosphere and you begin to work and establish yourself, I was fully planning on running for a state rep position at some point. But the system clings to you and tries to see your weakness. And it's usually money, sex, or power that they try to target for you to bend you and break you so that they can control you later on down the road. I told my wife, I said, I don't want to be in this atmosphere. And as a man, I don't know if I'm strong enough to be in this atmosphere. I don't want to be compromised.
Yeah.
And I see people who are compromised all the time. The honeypot is that's a real deal, guys. And it happens every day in these places. It's a cauldron of unrighteousness and sin, these places. And it didn't used to be that way, I don't think. I think there were people who really went there, and there was this upstanding mentality to really do what's best for the people, my neighbors, and the community and the population as a whole. But that doesn't exist anymore. That's just long gone.
Yep.
Yeah, developing and strengthening local community, I think, is still super important. And I think that's what people get to practice when they go and participate in feast-keeping seasons, or they get together with others and they operate in what would it look like if I lived next to 200 other people in tents. A lot of people have been disenchanted with the political system, but there is an importance in developing and strengthening your local relationships. So what would you have to share on the necessity of that and your encouragement for people? Because our relationships with the guy down the road is far more important than sometimes our relationship with the governor who's at the other end of the state.
Yeah, I think it's important to just stay connected, let people who are in charge know that you're there, and show up to meetings. Like, there's been a number of things that have happened in my county that have come up from time to time. And so when that happens, we usually put the word out to a lot of other people in my area, and we show up and we just voice our opinions. And it's just learning to be able to have the confidence to get up and speak and just share where your concerns are, and do so politely and but with some sort of aggressiveness, that you think certain things matter, and that goes a long way. And if we find somebody who is worth supporting financially, do that as well. But really, just make yourself known, and that you are there, and that you have certain things that you expect from the people who are supposed to be serving their community. Just being active, and that just not works with politics, but also, like, one of the things we did here in our community once we moved here was we got involved with a local food bank, and we would go and volunteer up at that food bank, and we did that for years. And so people would see you, they'd get to know you, and you'd meet all kinds of people, and that just kind of establishes, like, for instance, working at a food bank, it establishes amongst a lot of people that you care, that you're someone who is willing to serve and serve others. And there's a prison that's getting ready to be built in our county. It's a small one, but it's going to be a prison. And I'm looking forward to getting involved with that and just helping in any way I can, and just being involved. And all of that stuff is important.
That's great. Yeah, I did have one more question that, so I ask our viewers to always submit questions when we have a guest on, and the number one question they wanted me to ask you was, do you have any plans on returning to your Torah teachings? I can't tell you how many people asked me to ask you that.
Okay. Yeah, at some point. I've been toying with that idea recently. There's just been a lot of things that have been on my mind as I watch some of the stuff happening. But then just also, again, it's always been about apologetics and letting people understand that the Bible is true, and the reason why we're in such turmoil right now is because we've allowed that to get away from us. And so I just like having a voice with that. And guys, I got to be honest with you. The more we do what we do, the more we're putting targets on our back. Just know that, and be wary of that. And I have a 17-year-old and I have an 11-year-old, so I still have a young child in the house, and I've got to be a dad. That's my number one priority, is to be a dad. And so I take that job very seriously, and I'm not. I'm taking inventory of the world right now, and it's getting more and more scary. So I'm wondering, how much do I want to put a target on my back for the things that are happening? Because the reality right now, I know that I believe we're in the last days, like I said, and I want to see the end of the show. I really believe in a greater exodus. I believe that's going to happen, and I kind of want to be around to see it. It's going to be great one day for the people who will rise first, in Christ on that day, like it says in Thessalonians. But I want to see the show. I want to see the pillars of fire. I want to see the Exodus. And if it means, kind of hanging back and just taking on that priority of being a dad and raising up two godly men who are my sons, and just doing that as my role right now, then I'll do that too. But I'm playing with the idea. And I know there's a lot of people who've been asking, and they got a lot of benefit out of that. The Father has used the videos that I've done to reach a lot of people, and I'm thankful for that. But I also have to make sure I take care of the priorities I have at home.
Right on. And I dig your shirt, by the way. Where can I get a shirt like that?
What is Sanctified Supply is the name of the company.
Yeah, we know them.
Sanctified Supply. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing
they
this
had
hat
this
right now.
Awesome. Well, I don't think this was on their website, but if you call them or email them, I think they'll probably work out a deal. They can send you one. I think they sell these a lot at the events that they actually go to physically.
Like Hebrew Fest.
Yeah, that, and then they had a lot of kickback. A lot of people push back on something like this because they don't like its violence, and we're supposed to be peaceful as believers, and all of this nonsense. And it's like, again, go home and read your Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about how it's a battle against principalities, and it's not always just the Illuminati out to get the world, but sometimes it's just the rippling waves of sin from people with a lot of power and prestige. So, a guy who runs a big corporation, the rippling consequence of his sin of greed would be cutting costs or dishing out poisons to the masses, because it, is more money going into their wallet book. But then again, you have to wonder, it must be a mixture of the two. It can't always be just people and the consequences of their selfish sins and actions, but there does seem to be people behind the scenes pushing nefarious agendas, pushing death to mankind, pushing World War III. And even that, of course, there's got to be a love of money. There's got to be a little bit of greed justifying that. So I don't know how many people are actually listening to demons and the way that they're like doing this stuff just from the sinful, evil desire of their heart, other than having, the more minor motivations of their own sinful nature, right? But whenever we look at, what's happening in the world, I mean, do you think we're getting close? I mean, election year, you see a lot of things ramp up, specifically in election year. What do you think is going to happen over the next year? Do you think World War III is knocking at the door? And if that's the case, how will that affect people here in the United States?
Well, let me just start with, consequences have actions. And you're talking about the greed of corporations and all these things. And it's the love of money that allowed these corporations to say, you know what, maybe we'll put in all of these things that aren't food into our food products in order to get people more addicted to them and to make more money and save money on production. And it's just, and what they come out with is a lesser quality product that basically ruins anyone who eats it. It ruins their metabolism. And so that's just what it is today. If you have a slow metabolism and you're going to be overweight, you're going to be overweight because your body can't process these things. You can't, process the energy you're taking in. It's just not food. And so, consequences have actions. We're looking at that. The election, it's the same thing. Consequences are going to have actions. In 2020, I really believe that the election was stolen. We have video evidence of this. We have evidence of them pulling suitcases out from underneath tables full of ballots. We had ballots. We had videos of ballots or boxes of ballots being dropped off at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. We have videos of people feeding the same ballots 4 or 5 times, 3 or 4 times into the same machine over and over again. So it's like, when I just mentioned this to my patrons the other day, I think, if you're a child and mom and dad have put the cookie jar up high on the shelf because they don't want you eating cookies all the time. But one day when mom and dad aren't looking, you go up and you climb up that kitchen counter and you pull that cookie out of that cookie jar. And then you run off somewhere and hide and eat it. Are you going to do it again? Well, sure you are, because you got away with it the first time. You're going to try to do it again the second time. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And right now you've got the polls all of them are saying that Kamala Harris is in the lead. Kamala Harris is winning. She's got this wrapped up. If the election were held tomorrow, Kamala would win Michigan. She would win Wisconsin. She would win, Texas is even in trouble, they say. Whatever.
That's where I am.
Well, yeah, I know. And that's what I'm saying. They're doing this because the polls can say anything they tell them to say.
Yep.
They're doing this so that they can say on election night, when they call that election early, oh, she's won. She's president. We're calling it for a Kamala. Well, don't you know? She's been leading in the polls all this time. She's been leading in all these swing states. She's been leading the entire time. Of course she won. And so if you even try to disagree with this, we're going to call you an election denier. And what happened the last time is if you question this and you try to come up with evidence, they're going to prosecute you for coming forth with any evidence.
Yep.
And so the cake is baked. I don't think Trump has a prayer getting elected. But I've been wrong before. But maybe I'll be wrong this time. I just think we need to gear ourselves for the eventuality that we're going to have to live in a very different world going forward, and a lot of things are going to be changed. And this is why I tell people, get your family, get a hole, and crawl down in it, because there's a tornado coming, and the way you survive that is to get your family prepared and ready.
Yeah, me and Jake were joking around how if we see Kamala whatever her name is, Kamala. If she wins, we definitely know it's rigged.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, and she sounds really good right now on a teleprompter. She's on a teleprompter everywhere. But she's like one of the dumbest people to ever walk planet Earth.
And she talks to us like we're retarded. Like she
It's like it's ridiculous. But, on a teleprompter she sounds pretty good. But, getting her off teleprompter is the only way you're going to get people to see that right now, because the media has everyone so snowed over who this person really is and what she really thinks and how she articulates her beliefs. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those who are interested in an interesting documentary revolving around that topic, Zach mentioned the 2,000 Mules is one that came out in 2022. Yes. And that documentary demonstrated just with 2,000 people, enough of an effort could be made to have changed the outcome of that 2020 election.
We already talked about how the breakdown of morality is happening. We have generations upon generations who have never read the Bible and who have never been taught, thou shalt not steal. So in their minds, getting these 2,000 mules, these just mere 2,000 people, is not a big deal, because there is no right or wrong. This is not wrong to do what I'm doing and ballot stuff and do all these things. And so I'm doing what I believe is right, because I can define that however I want, and there's no consequences for it. And everyone will, if anyone tries to tell me that what I'm doing is wrong, I have all these people who will run interference for me.
Yeah, that's a good point of how the change in morality has justified behavior. I think it goes along the lines of the ends justifies the means type mindset. And when people believe that their particular political view is righteous, I mean, people don't just get in the streets screaming bloody murder because they think they're wrong. They think they're doing God's work, which is really interesting, the dichotomy of people pushing far leftist agendas or whatever, position. And they're like, I will, go to the ends of the earth to make sure this mindset, comes to roost. And
exactly right.
It's really crazy to think about. But yeah, do you think? I'm curious. Do you think that they purposely waited till the end to swap Joe Biden out? Do you think they always knew that he was going to be dropped from the ticket in order to make it more believable that Kamala, is getting all these new votes and she's, what's your thought?
I mean, it's impossible to know. My only guess is that they thought that they could use him for another term, at least to get through the election. And it just became to a point where that was not going to be. It was not feasible to hide the decline that he was experiencing anymore, and so they had to do something. Because the thing is, if you do a steal with him and his cognitive decline as it was, there's no way it would be believable. But this is going to be much more believable. If he had not declined in the speed that he did, and if he was able to hold it together for a little bit longer, if he had not done such a bad performance at that debate, they probably could have kept him in, and they could have pulled it off. But not with his current decline. They couldn't do it. Too many people would throw. We'd have what was going on right now in what's that country in South America? Was it South America who's having all that?
Venezuela.
Venezuela, right? Yeah. So that's what you'd have. You'd have all these people, and majority of the world would probably be on board with that, and they couldn't have that.
Yeah. Very interesting time to be alive. I think that's why guys like you, Zach, are so important, especially for our listeners, is because you're encouraging people to get back to the basics, right? Get back to family, get back to home, get back to our relationship with the Almighty. And it's super important because that's what all these things I feel like are distracting us from. And and to remind people of the importance of that is so important. So maybe, if you could, walk us through just, if people feel overwhelmed, they're juggling all these conspiracies and World War III, where does somebody start right now just listening to this interview, they don't know what to do. What's the most valuable, beneficial thing for somebody to take action on right now in terms of preparedness and at home?
Number one is water. Make sure you have a way to filter water. I would have a water filter on hand. That could be a Berkey, but it could also be something like a portable filter. Katadyn makes one. The Katadyn Vario, so there's a lot of good water filters out there that are portable. You want to be able to have something where if you had to go back in your backyard, let's just say you're living in the city or you're living in the apartment somewhere, and there's a trench that runs the water through your backyard or behind the building or something. You could dip that down, gather water with it, and be able to have filtered good water. So get a water filter or two, because water is the most important. Then go to food, dry goods like rice. You can get rice at like your local Costco or Sam's Club, and be able to bucket those. You buy buckets. You can buy food grade buckets at Walmart and put them in Mylar bags. You can get those online cheap. And I usually top mine off with diatomaceous earth. So in case there's anything in there nasty that hatches, any insects or anything like that, the diatomaceous earth kills them. Or you can also use dry ice. If you can get dry ice, put that on top and then let that sit with the lid on for about a day and then clamp it down. And the dry ice will remove all the oxygen out of the bucket. Anyway, so saving food like that, getting dry rice and wheat, if you have wheat, get a wheat grinder, beans, learn how to do canning. I'm getting ready to put a video up here soon on canning. So I just spent yesterday making a whole bunch of pints of pizza sauce and spaghetti sauce. It's either one. I usually use the same thing for either one. And then, canning a bunch of tomato juice to go with it. It's great for soups and stuff in the wintertime. It's also great for Bloody Marys if you like those. But anyway, just start, learning how to grow a garden. You can't just throw seeds in the ground and expect food to come out. It's a learning process. So start that learning process today. You still have time to put a garden in and put some fall items in there. Some squash and maybe some spinach and some other things, some root vegetables. So just start doing something. Understand that most people aren't doing anything. So even the few small steps that you can take, if you feel like, you're overwhelmed with all of this and it feels like, there's no way I'm going to survive this. It's okay. And you know what? If you don't survive this, you have the promise of his coming. So I love Psalm chapter 103. It talks about all of these things of mercy and everlasting. He's from everlasting to everlasting. And at the very end, I think it's in like around verse 17, he talks about how the grass withers and the flower fades. And he remembers. No one else remembers that field. No one else remembers the grass that grew in it. No one else remembers the flowers that grew in it, because your memory will fade. The memory of you will fade from existence of everyone else, but he remembers you. And so if for some reason you get taken up in this whirlwind that's coming and you don't survive, understand that you have a promise and that he will remember. This is just temporary. So I'm looking forward to that day when all things can be made right, and he will remember those who are his. So there you go.
Awesome.
I don't know any better way to finish off there, Zach. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for coming on Skiba News Nation, and we hope to do this again sometime. This was fun.
Absolutely. I'll come back anytime. I know sometimes it was kind of hard scheduling this because I got so much going on. I'm like, especially right now, I've got clients I'm juggling. I've got all kinds of stuff in the garden I'm trying to get out, and I've got, kids I'm managing. Thank goodness I'm not homeschooling, but that starts in like a month. So I got to get going on that too soon. So I'm just always busy, but reach out to me and we'll come back for sure. Absolutely. I love being on here.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right.
All right, guys. Make sure to check out Zach at anamericanhomestead.com, correct?
Yep, anamericanhomestead.com.
All right, Zach. Thanks for coming on.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Take care, guys. Have a good one. All right,
Later.
bye.
Bye. Have a good day.